What's that you say? You gotta turn on the radio. Okay. You got to listen to Prohibition. Radio with Emma Claire. You got to listen to Prohibition. Radio with Emma Claire.
Hi, I'm Emma Claire and welcome to the Prohibition Radio Show. This is our interview series, and this month it is the turn of Adam Smith, all the way from LA. Now, if you don't know Adam, he used to be part of a production duo called the Gentlemen Callers of LA. Since then, he's gone on to enjoy a glittering solo career with a string of successful hits, spanning the entire electro swing and vintage remix spectrum. So I'm super excited to have him as a guest on the show. I'm going to hand you over now to Adam and Nanook, so I hope you enjoy listening to their interview.
Hey, buddy, do you like to swing? Come with me. You're listening to Emma Claire, the best of all things swinging at Prohibition Radio.
Hey, you weren't in the waiting room long, were you?
No. Actually, I was worried that I was going to miss you because I was getting myself a fresh cup of coffee and taking a pee and all the stuff you got to do before you jump into a Zoom.
Nice, mate. Nice. Yeah, with the time difference, it's like I'm thinking, yeah, I couldn't have a coffee this late, but no, 11 a.m.'s fine for a coffee for you. Yeah,
right. I'm drinking decaf these days anyways, trying not to get too jacked up.
Why is that?
Yeah, I think I'm being a little more health conscious, these days, and trying to get a little more exercise in. Trying to, I don't drink any soda, pop, or anything like that.
Nice.
So I just, eating more vegetables, fruit.
Sounds like me, mate. We're getting old.
Yeah, at some point you got to stop taking your health for granted. You actually have to start taking care of yourself.
It's true, mate. It's true. Thanks for joining us. For those listeners that may not have heard of you, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Adam Smith. I used to be a member, half of the Gentlemen Callers. These days I've gone solo, and I'm out of Los Angeles, California. I'm a producer, musician, songwriter. Yeah, working out of LA.
Nice. So you said one half of the Gentlemen Callers of LA. The other half was Buck Down.
Yes. Right.
And I've seen you sharing some of his stuff on Facebook, so I assume it wasn't an unhappy split.
No, that's it was kind of an unhappy split, actually. Yeah, it's I've worked with Buck for, I would say, at least 15 years. We were in a previous project called The Mutator together.
Yeah.
And I think creative differences and probably a little, taking each other for granted and dispensing with pleasantries and niceties kind of wore the relationship out over time. And, we're doing some cool stuff together. We've done a lot of cool stuff together. We've played, just about every festival in America, and we've, traveled all over the world and done some really exciting things together. But I think it was time to, as all good things do, it was time for that to come to an end and for us to go on our separate courses.
Sometimes projects can run their course, can't they? And that's that happens. I'm sure you wish him the best.
Yeah, I definitely do, and I think like all relationships, like friendships, like marriages, like dating. I think every relationship has a lifespan, and sometimes it's a couple of years, sometimes it's 15 years, sometimes it's life. But knowing the difference between those that are in your life forever and those that are more seasonal, like, oh yeah, we had a great summer together. I think that's part of maturing.
Yeah, for sure, mate, for sure. But that's led you, that's given you time to explore your individual sound, hasn't it? So
yeah, exactly.
Recently, You've been putting out a lot more stuff under, the Adam Smith name. You've been very active with Freshly Squeezed. Tell us a bit how that relationship got built.
So yeah, actually, when Buck and I first started the Gentleman Callers, Freshly Squeezed was very top of our list of labels we wanted to work with. But I think at the time, we weren't quite ready. Our first tracks, weren't very well. They weren't very developed, and but we did wind up going to Glastonbury, which was one of the festivals that had always been a dream for both of us. We're like, oh yeah, let's do this.
Nice.
And that's where we met Nick Hollywood and spent some time with him. Just kind of gelled. It was a good friendship. And when Nick came to Los Angeles, maybe like the following year, I forget exactly when it was, I made a point of meeting up with him and taking him around a bit. A friendship kind of formed from there, and I sent him some tracks after he got back from LA, stuff I'd been working on my own, namely the Flashing Like Gatsby and Bright Like Hollywood. One of those early ones. I kind of sent him those, and he was like, "Yeah, I would totally put that out." So, so we started working. Yeah, it worked out great.
I think that for the newer people who are listening, or the people who are perhaps young DJs, young producers, one thing that you've just hit on there is cultivating sort of relationships. And
yeah,
I think that especially in a scene that's quite, everybody knows each other really for the most part within the electro swing scene. Right. That's super important, isn't it? You couldn't treat it as if it was like a faceless promoter, or people talk, people know, and if you're a nice guy in the scene, that pays dividends. And I think that's really important for new producers to get their heads around. It's like within a music scene, it can be like a wider family, and you hit the nail on the head there by saying cultivating relationship.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. I think a lot of music scenes can be very competitive. I know, certainly out here, the rock music scene, the Sunset Strip and all that can be cutthroat. Every moment that you spend in the spotlight is is me being in the dark. It's a zero-sum game. And that's one of the things I love about the electro swing community is that it's not like that. I mean, people are very supportive. They want to hear what you're working on. They want to promote, especially if they dig what you're doing. And I think that kind of cultivating that kind of a friendship, having like a similar interests and similar ideas about things. It was kind of funny. Like when Nick was out, one of the things we did was we took him on a fishing boat. And
excellent.
Yeah, so we went fishing. He didn't fish. He didn't want to touch any fish or anything, but he was a champ and he went along for the trip. And afterwards we were looking for a bite to eat, and we stumbled upon this kind of nice hotel that was just right on the beach. There was probably like 6 of us walking around, and we walked into the lobby, and Nick found this old record player with like a bunch of records that didn't look like anyone had turned it on in like 20 years. And it's like, hey, I wonder if this works. And he turned it on, and he starts digging through the creative records like, hey, this is actually a great record. I'm going to put it on. And he just kind of starts DJing freestyle. And like every choice he made was great. We're just like, oh, great choice, man. That was perfect. So he just kind of had this, you have that like-mindedness, and you're like, all right, this is a guy, I would be friends with, and I like what he's doing, and he's definitely an audiophile, and he definitely understands and loves music, and so it's just a natural fit. I definitely feel that way about others too. Another guy I really like, I've spent some time with him, is Pisk, Roberto.
Oh yeah,
he's from the Swing Growers. He's another. I can just tell he's quite a bit younger than I am, but we have similar sensibilities, and when he's been out our way, we make every effort to get them gigs and stuff. But I enjoy just kind of seeing what he's working on and seeing what he's thinking about, and seeing the rough cut of whatever video they're working on. And
did you just were you in his latest video that was done for Horny?
Yeah, I was in that. I'm the guy in the blue robe.
That's an excellent video, that.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. It's an excellent way of solving the problem of how do you make a video when we're in quarantine. And I'll be honest with you, like we're struggling with the same issue right now. We have a video for the single that just came out. So the single came out just a few days ago on Friday, Coming Up Swinging, and we got about half of it shot. Then everything got into lockdown, and we weren't allowed to be around people anymore. And we were going to film the last half of it in a club, but the club had to close down the doors.
Oh no!
So it's kind of a disaster, and we're trying to film other things as safely as possible to kind of finish the video. But the way the Swing Growers did, or the way Roberto did it with Horny was perfect. Just crowdsource it.
It was making the best out of a bad situation, wasn't it? No one appreciated you being locked down or losing gigs or any sort of opportunities like for recording or anything that you were booked in the next few months, but made the best of the situation, And
in some ways, the lockdown's been good for me. I think we had a few gigs lined up, but one of the there's one gig that comes around LA every year. It's been a regular thing for 10 years in LA, 15 years in San Francisco, and this was the first year that they just canceled it. And it was actually just before the whole quarantine thing, but so there was, I don't know, the crowd in LA is very fickle. They really only like a couple of different kinds of music. The nightlife in general, like it really has to be very specific. It's been very difficult to cultivate an audience for electro swing in Los Angeles. It's just a difficult city. It's hard to explain. But so some of the successful gigs disappearing has been kind of disappointing. And then when COVID-19 struck, all the gigs went away. Like people gathering together in any kind of a concert or any kind of a room just all went away, which was disappointing. But for me, it's actually given me the opportunity to really work on some of the older songs that I had started, but was having difficulty finding the time to finish. There's only so many hours in the day, and I think if you're a DJ who likes to tour and you're a producer who likes to create music, one is succeeding while the other suffers. I mean, you can't really do both unless you don't sleep. Which, as you get older, sleep becomes more important. So you're not gonna give that up.
It's got to be 8 hours a day minimum.
Right. Exactly.
You mentioned Coming Up Swinging earlier, so that's your latest single.
So 2 weeks ago, a Caro Emerald remix called "That Man" came out, and that was something I was really excited about because that song's actually been done for about a year. This is another classic like insider music industry thing that seems to happen a lot to me. Is the label loves you. The label, hires you to do a remix. And then the person that actually hired you to do the remix, it's time for them to retire. They've been doing the same job for 15 years, but when they sign you and they line up that one single, that's when they move on to the next job. Yeah. So everything kind of gets lost in the shuffle, and the label was super excited about the remix. I was super excited about doing the remix, and then nothing for like a year. I didn't hear a word. And finally, the new guy who replaced her came on. He's like, "Hey, this remix is great. We're going to release it." I was like, "Oh, perfect. Great. I'm so glad." So yeah, remix came out 2 weeks ago. Fantastic song. Great artist. Obviously, Caro Emerald is, she's a legend.
Yeah.
And that record did very well, 10 or so years ago. And I think they were kind of celebrating the success of the record, and they wanted to do some remixes. And I was lucky enough to kind of get in on that. And so that came out, and I think that's doing very well. The response has been great. And so hot on the heels of that, I think we were actually going to release Coming Up Swinging on the same day, but then we decided to wait a couple of weeks. And so, yeah,
Probably
that
wise.
came out in May, and Coming Up Swinging came out early June. Yeah.
Excellent. And you mentioned that Caro Emerald, a bit of a legend in modern times.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your modern influences. When you're producing, what would you say are your main influences? Or are you start producing and whatever happens?
That's a good question. So I one nice thing about living in Los Angeles and having been in, so the biggest band I was in previous to this was a band called The Mutator.
Yeah.
And I say big in terms of actual size. There were no fewer than 20 people on stage at any given time.
I've seen a little bit on YouTube, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, you saw, I mean, there's, we divided it up into like the music team and the performance team. So there was, fire spinners and hoopers and weird characters and life-size puppets and explosions and fire techniques and stuff like that. But then there was also just a massive band. We had, several drummers and a couple of bass players and full horn section. And so I've stayed in touch with all of these musicians and definitely had some ideas. I've always done, I'm not brand new at this. And one of the things I've always really enjoyed doing is meshing live with robots. I love having like really killer performers come in and just do like ripping sax solo or something, but put it in to this very robotic and electronic kind of a sound. I've never been a good enough producer to convincingly copy any particular genre or any particular style. So it always kind of winds up, for better or for worse, it always kind of comes out sounding like something I would do.
That's quite a positive thing, though. There's a lot of people that aspire for that and spend their whole, production lives, aiming to attain a sound that is unique. And I think
Right.
one thing that I've come across from all the people I've been speaking to, both in recent months in these podcasts, but also through 20 plus years of DJing, producing, promoting myself, is that there is that definite split between people who just tend to do what they do and have attained sort of quite a unique sound, and those who then try and emulate that. And I think you're in a very lucky position to have found your unique sound, and in many ways it's helped to shape the genre, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a weakness that became a strength. I knew that I loved jazz. I've always really loved jazz and swing, and I like the complexity of it, and I like the chord structures, and I like just playing with different melodic ideas. And I also really like EDM and dance music and bass music, and I think combining those two styles, even using some traditional 2-5-1 song structure and Tin Pan Alley kind of style songs, but reinventing them. I like to think of it almost as like an advanced alien civilization, coming to Earth in the 20s and like hearing this far out, like weird earthling music and trying to make it themselves, but like kind of messing it up in a way. Like, that's what I like to think I'm doing, is like taking these cool elements from a bygone era and combining them with, things that I'm interested in, sound design and things like that.
I love that, mate. I love that. There's one influence on your Facebook page in the About section, which really caught my eye. Reason being, he's probably my biggest influence. So I thought I'd got to ask you about that.
First of all, let me see if I can guess who it is before you reveal.
Go on.
Eno?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, hey. It's almost like I can read your mind.
There you go.
Yeah, no, Brian Eno is a huge influence, not just because of his music, because some of his music is pretty out there. He's done a lot of cool stuff, prog rock kind of stuff to ambient kind of stuff. I, of course, adore the ambient stuff, and a lot of his prog rock stuff I really dig. But it's also a big part of his influence on me is his approach to producing and his approach to music. So it's even less about the product, the end product, and more about the methodology. For example, like he has, I'm sure you're aware, he and another guy, Eric Schmidt, I think, designed a set of playing cards, and they were designed to overcome writer's block. So like if you're in the studio, like this song is going nowhere, what do I do? Oh wait, I've got this deck of cards over here, and you lift it over, and it's like, one of the recommendations might be like, make the weakness the strength. It was
like the oblique strategies.
Oblique strategies. Yes. Yeah. And his approach to life and philosophy and production, and even having simple strategies to finishing music, like we've all experienced sitting down to your DAW of choice, Live or Logic, and it's just like, where do I even start? There's like thousands of sounds. And one of his big philosophies was, limit your choices. Go through your samples ahead of time, or go through your sound banks ahead of time, and rather than having like 4,000, banks of sounds that you could choose from, pick like 12 and mark them. This is a sound I really like. It's a sound I'm going to use a lot. I can tweak it a little bit if I need to, but limit your choices so you're not always, facing that avalanche of decisions to make.
It's a fantastic approach, not just that specific one you've highlighted, but overall having something that pushes you outside of your comfort zone or outside of the box thinking. I really like that. And like you say, it wasn't just his ambient stuff that inspired myself, some of his essays, and right. I think he was just an all-round clever chap, or rather is a clever chap that was inspirational on a few levels. And for me, it was his ambient music rather than his prog rock, but I could see.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
I could see the appeal across the board. And seeing stuff, that he'd done with Fripp and his brother as well, their whole movement that they had between them was, pretty inspirational for me.
And he has this one book, I forget exactly what it's called, but it's basically like his diary from a year of being Brian Eno. And it's, it goes from, working on a record with James to attending a concert in like Ireland, of Bjork, and then winding up in like a hot tub later with like the guys from U2, and like just all of his conversations and just like his whole lifestyle is just like, yes, I want that. That's what I want.
Proper rock star, but in the most understated way.
Exactly. Yeah, he's not throwing TVs out of hotel windows or anything. He's talking to people and listening to music and discussing philosophy. I love it.
Amongst those sort of more, obviously he's still relevant and still producing, but of that era or of that generation, what other inspirations have you had that you've sort of taken a hold of and used to help create your music?
Well, I've always loved Kraftwerk, of course. I've always loved Depeche Mode, of course.
Nice.
That's definitely music that electronic music that I kind of grew up hearing. There was, in the like mid to early 90s, there was a lot of, in particular, a lot of British music, honestly. For some reason, for like such a small country and such a small place, like you all come out with like an enormous amount of excellent music.
It's like a boiling pot of music, you know, and I think wider, the UK as a whole has a couple of little epicenters, you know, right away from the 60s. There was the Liverpool sort of scene, Beatles, etc. And then, you know, how a lot of urban music emanated from London, but then Manchester was synonymous with house and rave and, you know, the early 90s, that sort of.
And honestly, like all that, like the Beatles are probably like my favorite band if I had to pick one. But also, you know, there was a lot happening with, you know, that kind of rave music. I remember like, you know, Opus 3, and I remember, you know, listening to stuff like, like Orbital and
Massive.
William Orbit, all the Orbs, you know, the Orb,
all the
William
Orbs.
Orbit, Orbital, exactly. You know, like there was just like a lot of like cool electronic music happening overseas, because I think there was a scene and a pirate radio scene that really supported it. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out. Over here, we had bands like Meat Beat Manifesto was a big one. He was great at coming up with like really good grooves with really deep bass and really complex rhythms and very psychedelic at the same time. Like I really like, as much as I love jazz and like, you know, and you know, even rock and roll, like for me, if it's not a little bit psychedelic, it's not music.
Well, I think that's one thing that, you know, the American rock and prog scene and that sort of generation, sort of 60s and 70s, did really, really well. You know, you had like, well, an obvious example, Grateful Dead, and how they sort of were synonymous with that sort of psychedelia. And that was one thing that I think you guys did very, very well, that then went on to inspire a whole next generation. And, you know, outside of the electro swing, I'm super eclectic. I listen to and DJ a lot of techno and a lot of psytrance as well. And it's nice to have a few different influences. I find if you're just locked into a specific genre, what I've recognized is you can become very good at that, and you know, you could just basically really, really formulaic, right? I'm going to write some techno, I'm going to write some swing, or I'm going to write some ambient, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
But when you start dipping in and out of other genres and then bringing them together, you can end up with quite a few happy accidents. You know, stuff goes in a direction you wouldn't normally expect, or, you know, things evolve a little bit, and I quite enjoy that, you know.
Yeah, me too. Another thing that can help make that happen is collaboration, which is something, you know, since splitting ways with my last partner, it's really opened me up to try different collaborations, and really unexpected results have come out of that. And that's a lot of fun. You know, I'll get a track to a certain point, and then, especially somebody you trust, you know, rather than just handing it over to just somebody, handing it over to somebody who's like, I know they're going to have their own ideas about this. You know, let's see what they come up with. Let's see what meat they put on the table. That's been a lot of fun for me.
It's really interesting you mentioned that sort of evolution of music. We normally, before an interview, open up our Facebook to some fan questions. And we've just had one from electro swing vocalist Alana Lies, who has just dropped a question. Quote, there's been a lot of talk about the need to keep electro swing evolving and breaking boundaries. What are your thoughts on this, and how do you see your own music aiding this? End quote.
Well, I should point out that Alana and I just finished a couple of songs. She contributed.
That's a well-timed question from her.
Yeah. She contributed some vocals to a song I was working on, because we kind of connected a couple of years ago, but didn't really make any moves on it. It didn't really work together. And then to help her out, I produced a track that she had been working on, which came out great. I mean, just hang in there, because like Alana's about to come out with some great stuff.
Yeah, I spoke to her a couple of weeks ago. We just had her on the last episode. She didn't divulge too much, but I believe her fans and whatnot are in for a treat.
Yeah, well, she's a real talent. She has a very powerful voice. She can sing on key. Her lyrics are great. So I know she's biding her time, and I know she's making some music and waiting for the right moment to spring. And she's going to spring, and it's going to be great. But she's right. I think, or the question is a good question. As much as I love electro swing and even the term electro swing, in America anyways, I don't know if you guys have struggled with this as well. We've struggled with like whether we should use that word.
Yes.
You know, like this is going to be an electro swing party. Is that going to be a plus or a minus? Is that going to be an eye roll or is that going to be a hell yeah, I'm there? You know, like you don't really know. And I think part of that is because, you know, the genre has kind of gone through, I think, some growth spurts and then some plateaus where it's like, okay, well, everything kind of sounds the same now. And it really hasn't, you know, there was that one song that kind of did it perfect. And then there was those 30 songs that kind of tried to approximate what that one song was doing. And they did a pretty good job. You know, so you kind of wind up with this, you know, almost like when you, you know, like when you inbreed dogs, you know, like you get like a really definite dog, you know, for sure. Like, oh yeah, we want to create a pug with like big eyes and a short nose. And like the way to do that is to keep inbreeding. And you nail that one thing, but the dog itself isn't very healthy. And I think
that's a perfect analogy. You know? There's definitely downsides to inbreeding. I think we can agree. Right. You know, and that's why I was kind of thinking like, all right, so I got this guy who's like an amazing rapper. Wouldn't it be kind of funny to like have like a proper big band horn arrangement with like a rapper, but then like some like really like kind of like bass music elements with grindy things and glitch. Like it just, to me, it sounded funny. Yeah. And it kind of, you know, I think my style tends to be maybe like 20% more aggressive than most electro swing that I hear. I tend to make it a little faster and a little harder, not over the top, but that's something that I purposely kind of put in there because it's what I'm looking for when I'm putting together a DJ set. Yeah. Keeping interesting influences. I think the fact that it kind of went into like a drum and bass way and like more of a glitch hop kind of a way. And, you know, it wasn't all just like swing house, I think is a good thing. I think keeping the influences fresh, I think really helps keep, you know, the genre fresh. 100% agree with you. I know you guys are miles apart, but when we spoke to Speaker Freaks recently, you know, comments were made in a similar manner of that slightly bass-heavy sound, a little bit of an influence of electro, and, you know, sort of drawing on a few different influences to keep the gene pool sort of fresh, so to speak, was the way to go. And do you think that's you mentioned that it's sort of difficult for electro swing to get a foothold in LA? And do you think that that's due to perceptions from previous tracks, or do they like it bass heavier than it stereotypically is? Or so here's the thing, and it's a head scratcher, believe me. When we opened up for Caravan Palace when they came 2 years ago, sold out show. I mean, the place was totally mobbed, and like nice. People loved it. We opened up for Parov Stellar a couple of years ago when he came into town, packed house. So the Nokia Center was just like there. I'm sure it was sold out. So people definitely do like that kind of music, even if they don't really know what it's called. Yeah. Like the typical American doesn't really know what electro swing is. I think that's part of the problem. And the ones that do, you know, maybe got hooked into like, oh yeah, I really discovered that like around 2013. And like, you know, obsessed over it and got tired of it and moved on. You know, so there's a couple things kind of working on it. But LA in general is a difficult city for live events and live music because there's so many big players here. Professor Watson and I have tried to do a few things here. And there's another party that started in San Francisco called Trapeze. And we were doing trapeze parties here in LA, and those were small, but
the people that came, I would say, usually around 250 to 400 people tops, a small but loyal following. Like people really did like those parties.
That's quite a good attendance. Perhaps not when you're comparing it to a stadium size or arena size gig, but from a small country, and especially in Manchester where the scene's not quite as big as London, especially for electro swing, 400's a good attendance, but it doesn't compare to the same as maybe like a big house event or
right. Well,
EDM.
the problem comes with growing it. So like you can the 250 to 400 was at more or less like Burning Man style events where somebody would own a warehouse or something and you could do it at the warehouse. But when you try to cross over from the underground into like the mainstream and you start playing like, actual rooms that people have heard of, like if you were going to try to book like an electro swing party at say like the Viper Room, the world famous Viper Room on the Sunset Strip, there's so many big players that that own those nights. So they're going to own, there's going to be a promoter that owns Friday night and a promoter that owns Saturday night. And they don't take risks on events that are not going to just completely sell out. Like they have to sell out every time. So it's not, I find, as a touring musician, I find like if we get out of LA, even by just a couple of hours, if you go to Phoenix or if you go to, Idaho, it's easier to cultivate, a bigger party going like, yeah, hell, I've never heard of that, but I'll check it out because
That's
it's a Friday night. Yeah.
That's interesting. I think what you've just said, to draw a parallel with the English scene about certain promoters or certain venues not wanting to take a risk on events that aren't a dead cert, that's something that happens quite a lot here, and it's made it quite difficult to throw large events or get in the venues which would suit the music. Because quite often, you'll put a good proposal together and they'll just say, but I already sell out. And, and it costs me half as much and the people drink twice as much on the bar. And it makes it a difficult proposition, and I think from my perspective, seeing venues who are interested in the music makes a big difference.
Yeah, and there's a few out here. There's one called the Cicada Room, which is perfect. I mean, I've been drooling over this venue for years because it's completely Mac Daddy. It's everything's the Red Valley. It looks like it looks like one of the clubs that you see like in the movies that are.
I'm going to send them a copy of this podcast for you.
Yeah, exactly. Like. And it's upper class, it's red carpet dropped off by the limousine, people, it's black tie event kind of a thing. It's a very, very classy establishment that will never, ever take my call.
Yeah, that happens all the time, places that you think would be perfect, but, the electro swing isn't a big enough proposition for a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of venues, and that's a shame. And I think that maybe ties in with what you were saying earlier about the description of electro swing or the genre name and the connotations of that. Because I've literally, as a bit of a litmus test with venues, phoned under one name and said, I've got an electro swing night. Right. And then, sorry, they're busy at the moment. They're in a meeting, Yeah. You phone back half an hour later and it's like, so I'm a big house promoter and, we're looking for a new venue. We've already sold X amount of tickets. I'll just put you through.
I've noticed that out here too. Yeah, no, I've noticed that here too. Like if you say we're going to throw an electro swing night, it's like, what? No, not interested. But if you say we're going to throw a Gatsby party, a 20s, like everybody knows what that is. And like, no, that sounds wonderful. Let's do that.
Exactly. So speaking of Dapper, you mentioned that venue there that was Top Hat and Tails.
Yeah.
I have to ask you about the remix you just did for Barton Baker, speaking of Top Hat and Tails. So you did that for Buddha Bar and
Yeah, so actually the remix I did with Barton Baker was called Atlantido. Yeah, it got released on Buddha Bar, which was another goal of mine from the early aughts. Buddha Bar kind of ruled, the trend-setting, cool world beat, future world funk music sound of the 20s. And there was a radio show, a very famous radio show at the time called Metropolis here in Los Angeles, and they just played the coolest music. And I was so into that label.
Yeah.
And it was always a dream to be on Buddha Bar. And then Bart and Baker, I'm telling you, man, those guys are kingmakers. They open doors.
Yeah.
Very influential, and everybody loves them. And if it can happen, they can make it happen.
The lovely people as well. It was a pleasure to host them at Prohibition in Manchester a year or two back.
Yeah, we hosted them at a music festival here in America a few years back now. And yeah, very lovely people. Backstage, waiting to go on stage. For one thing, I mean, I've become pretty good friends with them since then, but like this was, I'm not going to say first impression, but we didn't know each other as well. Man, I really had to give them props because we're waiting to go on stage and they come out. Of course, they're in their tuxes. Of course, they have
of course
champagne, and it's dirty. Like everyone's got, sweat stains under their armpits and nappy hair and, cut off jeans, but they're in their tuxedos. And Bart is pouring champagne, and I get up close to him. I'm like, hey, that's a nice cologne you're wearing. What is it? Oh, that's Bart and Baker. They had their own Bart and Baker cologne scent made. So like, I give up. I can't compete with this. Like these guys are too good.
No, they are the undeniable bosses of the scene, in my opinion, and so understated as well. And that's what I was saying about being lovely people, because they do what they do. They're lovely, approachable, friendly.
They are so friendly and so approachable. But you're right, they're bosses. Like here's another really funny Bart and Baker story. So they booked us at this kind of cool underground place in Paris, and it was like kind of like a burlesque variety night, and very classy club. I forget what it was called at this time, but very, very classy. We started. This is Gentlemen Callers. We started our set. We were down there with Kiwi Star. It was a really fun night with Kiwi.
Nice.
Bart and Baker had to go somewhere in the morning. I think they were going to Japan in the morning, so they were just going to pop in for a little while and just enjoy some of the set. And so they came in, and the place was packed. Every seat in the house was taken. But as soon as Bart and Baker came down the stairs, there was this one like horseshoe-shaped booth that was like the perfect spot. It was like, looking right at the dance floor and right in front of us. And there was like 5 or 6 people in there enjoying drinks. And the manager comes out and just like snaps his fingers. You guys got to get out of here. Clears the booth so that Bart and Baker could sit there. It's like one of those like gangster movie kind of moments. And I could tell that they were kind of embarrassed because they're such nice guys.
Yeah.
But, the manager of the club was not going to make Bart and Baker stand or find some, lesser seat to sit in.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Hey, listen, we've just had another question come in. Oh, and there's a lot of producers cropping up. I think you've definitely sparked interest in the producer community. This one's from Andy McBain, who's asked,
"Sure,
how do you think electro swing will sound in 2030?"
Oh,
so I guess this links to the what we were discussing earlier about the evolution of keeping swing fresh. So, in another 10 years, how do you think electro swing will sound?
Oh boy, yeah, it's impossible to say.
Tough question, Andy. Tough question.
It's a very tough question. I think part of it is, I already feel like just from a technology standpoint, if nothing else, like for example, this new, what's it called? Spleeter. This new like plugin just came out that like, it's amazing. Like it creates stems from old recordings. And it'll divide it up. Like these are the drums, this is the bass, this is the vocal. So it's a total game changer. Like it just, it's kind of a pain to install, but once you get it installed, like you can really isolate a vocal from like a 1920s band, where the way music has sounded up to this point was based on the fact that you couldn't do that. Like you always had to like, shelf something or filter something to kind of like isolate the vocal as much as you could, or just lean into it with the weird scratchy offbeat stuff. And so like technology just keeps like I feel like I'm drinking out of a fire hose. Just like the amount of information and the rapidity with which things change and grow is so unpredictable, but also so game changing. Who would have pictured wavetable synthesis, 10 years ago? You had FM and you had analog, and it was about it, and things that you didn't know were going to be created come on the scene, and it changes everything. And I think that's going to get faster between now and 2030 for sure. And I think the thing that I haven't thought of, the thing I didn't know someone was going to invent, is going to make all the difference. And I can't imagine what that thing is.
That's you're right. And every now and again, something new, like you've just mentioned, Spleeter there, something new comes along, and it just pushes the game forward a whole next notch.
Right. Well, there was a time when there wasn't MIDI, like keyboards had to be played by a human being. And then like MIDI happened. And it was like, now that changes everything. Yeah.
And, I think in my lifetime as a producer, I think the first track that I did was about 2001, probably bedroom producing a little bit before that. And, I still had like a Yamaha sampler, like a hardware rack mount sampler. And I think it had enough memory for about 4 seconds. and now it's just like, you can record hours and hours and hours, endless amounts of the highest resolution, lossless audio, and just have it at your disposal.
Well, recently I was making, I had a hand clap sound that I didn't really love. And I was just like, this could be so much cooler if I just layered a couple more hand claps. I started layering and layering and layering. And I put like a metal sound in there, and I put like a cough in there. And
how many did you end up with?
It was like this chain with like 8 different samples. And some of them were hard panned, and some of them were down the center. And I realized that like it wasn't that long ago. When I was starting out, like my first sampler, like you say, like you had to save the samples onto a floppy disk. You only had like a few seconds. And like a kick drum was a kick drum because that's all you had room for. You could layer a kick drum, 20 deep if you wanted to. I don't know why you'd want to, but you could. And it's just incredible.
It's interesting to see how, the evolution of technology has changed the way that people produce. And one question which I was curious of sort of hearing about was your workflow, your sort of creative workflow, what you use to produce and how you go about it.
So, my workflow is thus. I generally start an idea, probably most likely in Ableton Live, but I also use Logic and I also use Pro Tools.
I'm a big fan of Ableton Live. It's neat and it does everything you need it to. You can get ideas down quickly, so I'm not surprised you're open with that.
Yeah, it's a great way to start ideas, and it's also a very intuitive composition tool. So kind of trying different things out and laying things out is all very easy and quick. I do like some of my sample library and loop libraries and stuff that I have in other DAWs, but typically I'll start a song in Ableton. And then I will have either a musician come over to play over it. Like if I need, that's when I bring in the real musicians, because usually my final decisions are made when everything's in there, especially a vocal.
Yeah.
So I'll start kind of a track that will establish the tempo and the key and the overall flavor, and I'll try to get it as close to finished sounding as I can. And then I hand it off to other collaborators and wait till their parts come in. And, sometimes what they come up with is exactly the perfect thing. And it's just a matter of the song kind of writes itself. Now it's just, now you're just supporting this song that's already there. And sometimes it's a little bit more of a slog than that. And you find yourself like, I know this is going to be cool. It just, I don't know, maybe I need to have somebody else come in and try something else. Or I find my best songs tend to be the ones that come together the fastest. But one of the songs that's coming out later this year on the full-length album, man, I was beating my head against the wall for like 2 years. Like I had an idea And the idea I believed in, I didn't scrap it. I was like, no, this is still a good idea. It just hasn't quite come together yet. And I had like 2 different violinists play on it. I had somebody who played accordion come in and do a thing. I had a bunch of different vocals. I had some different horn parts put on it. And it just wasn't coming together. And then one day it just turned the corner. All of a sudden, it's like, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. Like, amazing.
Sometimes, yeah, like you say, the best tracks just almost come out of nowhere. Yeah. And it doesn't seem laboured. There's no elements of it you have to force. It just, like you say, writes itself. And I wish they could all happen like that.
Well, that's also one of those Brian Eno ideas that I've taken to heart over the years is, when you have a track and it's pretty cool, but it's not awesome, by muting, use that mute button, just like, don't be afraid to, even if you spend a long time trying to, come up with that one cool part, if the song isn't coming, like, break it down to its most essential, basic components. What is working? Is the groove working? Is the bass okay? Are the drums okay? All right, get rid of everything else and start over from there. Sometimes that can be a way of salvaging a song that's kind of gone tits up.
I love that attitude. And I think one thing that I try to do through these podcasts is to share tips with perhaps young aspiring DJs and producers. And out of everything that you've said, that would be something that I'd highlight as people who are aspiring into production could pay attention to. That's a fantastic tip.
I have one more too, and it's funny because
go for it. Drop as many as you want, mate. We've got all night.
Well, this is one that, like, Emma had specifically, Emma Claire, just to be clear, because I work with a couple of Emmas, but Emma had kind of just thrown out there, like, I'm going blind and deaf, just like staring at this track. I've been working on this track for like 8 hours straight, and like I'm losing my perspective, and I can't see the forest for the trees. Like, a great strategy that I've been using lately is like a 120-minute rule. Go for it 100% for 2 hours.
Yeah.
But turn off the Facebook, turn off the notifications, turn off the phone. Like, you have to focus for real for 2 hours. And you can accomplish in 2 hours, undistracted, what you can accomplish in 8 hours, totally distracted, easily, probably more.
Focused work blocks are a big tip, to give your brain chance to digest what it's doing, to rest your eyes, to come at a certain problem or challenge with a fresh perspective. Exactly.
And to make it winnable, to make your goals like small and simple and winnable. Hey, and then I've only got 2 hours to work on this, or I'm only going to work on this for 2 hours. This is what I hope to accomplish.
Yeah, for sure.
Doable. Yeah.
I think work blocks are something that I use myself, but also sleeping on problems, coming back to something like you just said, you can't see the wood for the trees. Sometimes just taking a bit of a break away from it, slightly longer than, ordinarily if I'm doing 2 hour work blocks, I'll do 2 hours on, half hour off. But then sometimes if you're really stumped on something, just leaving it, sleep on it, coming back to it the next day. I found fresh inspiration doing exactly that. And it's a little bit like if you lose your keys or your wallet, rather than stressing about it, just giving it a break and then coming back to it. And suddenly you've given your brain space to remember and space to solve the problem.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. 100%.
So with all that discussion on production, it would be remiss of me not to ask, we've been all locked down for a while, and you guys have been as well over there.
Yeah.
Are your fans going to suddenly be swamped with a load of productions that you've done over the last couple of months? You've been spending all your time producing, or have you used it as an opportunity to have a break?
I'm trying to make... Okay, so something has just happened recently, which I think is making it easier to take a break, which is, for a while there, it was spring here in LA, so it was rainy and chilly for a while.
Right.
And you didn't really want to do anything. Plus, everything was closed anyways. But recently, at least, like, our parks and our beaches have opened back up, so you can there's somewhere to go if you need a break.
Yeah.
So I am trying to make an effort to, I would say, for about 6 to 8 weeks there, I was just spending a lot of time buried in production. And, some of it working on songs, but some of it just working on library. Some of it, truncating samples and picking sounds and synthesizers and learning how to use a new synthesizer and stuff like that. But I think, like you say, having a break keeps that inspiration level up. And so I've been trying to go to the beach and rollerblade and take hikes, and actually went in the water last week.
Nice.
Much to my surprise, it was very pleasant. I thought it was going to be too cold, but it was great. I'm trying to make it.
Because last time you were in it was so long ago.
Yeah, it was. So I mean, making an effort to spend time with like real people. We're starting to socialize, but carefully. We did. My best friend is this guy Brad, and a few of us got together last weekend and stayed outside. Stayed in the backyard, and we brought some beers and some salty snacks, and it was good to see people in the flesh, but still maintain some distance and still feel like you're being as safe as possible. It takes some of the bite out of just staying home all the time.
Yeah, true. But I can assume that through this period of time, you've produced 1 or 2 tracks that your fans can look forward to. Yeah,
actually, it's been good for me in that sense. I know a lot of people are losing their marbles, but I've actually been doing great. I like having some uninterrupted time to think about things and to work on things. I guess that's the introvert part of my personality coming out, where I like to be around people, but it's been good for me because a lot of the stuff that I would have been doing kind of got canceled. So I do find myself with a chance to think about things. And I would say easily like half a dozen tracks that were in various forms of pre-production. I feel like I might have just finished the last one. So I'm getting ready to start some new stuff, but this has been great for me finishing things that I had already started. Yeah, June 5th, Coming Up Swinging came out in July. So these are all staggered by 6 weeks. Every 6 weeks, we're going to come out with a new single.
Nice.
So in July, we're coming out with a new one called Voodoo Queen. And then in August, we're coming out with one called Caravan, which I'm just really thrilled with all of that stuff. The quality of it, I feel like I've had some time to just sit there and get it right.
I think what you mentioned about spending some of your time, learning how to do it or work your way around a new sampler or a new bit of, new VST, or spending a bit of time, like tidying up your files and, sort of what you were hinting at there.
Yeah.
Going through that process, it's almost self-developmental, isn't it? Because it's something that a lot of people overlook, or a lot of new producers overlook.
For sure. I think workflow is really important. And I think sometimes you feel creative. Sometimes you're like, yeah, I want to write something. And sometimes you kind of don't. Like you have time to work on something, but maybe it's more of a, let me work on my library kind of a day.
And I think one thing that I found is if you spend those downtimes where you should probably be being productive, but you're not perhaps in a creative mood, rather than forcing the creativity, doing something that's going to help you next time you are feeling creative. Yeah, so if all your samples are in order and everything's in check, next time you are feeling creative, you're not going to have to spend half an hour looking for that sample that you've got in your mind and ruining your workflow, ruining your creativity. And it all sort of flows a bit more naturally then.
Yeah, so absolutely.
I respect you for filling your time. Nice. I bet it's fun to be outside as well, though.
Yeah, it has been. It's been good to get out. I think it's good for your emotional health. It's good for your mood. It's good for your, it's good for your health, health, just getting some sun on the skin and all that kind of stuff. So
bit of vitamin D.
Yeah.
So we've just had another question come in from the Electro Swing Facebook page.
Sure.
Everybody's favorite Canadian, Syed, who is always on there posting questions.
Sure.
Syed has asked, why not focus on neo-swing sounds that will be more popular with American audiences rather than the bass-heavy glitch and drum and bass?
For one thing, I think here, at least in San Francisco and LA, where I live, there's a very strong underground community of very bass heavy music. So that's what you hear at music festivals. That's what gets the main stage out here.
Got you.
There's Bass Nectar, Glitch Mob, guys like that, Ill Gates. There's a handful of people that are producing that kind of music. So that's kind of what you hear when you go out. That being said, personally, I kind of take little bits and pieces from if I am at a music festival and I hear something that's kind of crazy, I'm like, oh, wow, what was that? Like, I got to figure that out. Like, that was kind of cool. I get inspired to try things that I'm attracted to, that I'm drawn to. I'm not necessarily, of course, I want everything I do to be hugely successful, but
yeah,
I can't really make music for other people or in anticipation of what other people might like.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really have to just make things that I like with the belief that, like, hey, if I like it, somebody else is going to like it too, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think in a way, and this is sort of contrary to what you just said, but I think the two tie in quite nicely. If you were to be focusing too strictly on swing, you'd almost close off that audience, in terms of what we were saying earlier about how certain venues are a little bit put off by that electro swing bracket. Right, so, you're trying to find that line of writing music that is true to you and true to your sound and true to what you enjoy. But at the same time, you can't alienate the people that it's for,
Yeah, for sure. And, I usually find myself either, on a stage or, performing a room of people that are kind of familiar with bass music and glitch music and glitch hop and that kind of stuff. So it's never a bad move. One of the other things I do when I'm playing a crowd that's maybe agnostic to electro swing is try to bring in, one of those cool covers. Like, hey, I really love the All About That Bass cover that that the Jukebox does there. Like things like that can be a little bridge to the unknown of like, come on, guys, you gotta admit this is cool. There's a good beat. It's fun. Here's a song you probably recognize.
It's fun. It's fun and accessible, and I think that anything that, like you say, bridges that gap is definitely going to be a positive. And actually, Syed's just cropped up with another question. I'm sure we can guess the answer to this, but are there any plans to come over to Canada once the pandemic is over?
So this weekend I'm working with Amanda Raygun on a Toronto-based masquerade. I'm like a masquerade ball, the Mirror Ball, which I'm really excited about because it's building some relationships with people in Canada. I've never done a proper trip to Montreal, but I've toured like when Party Like Gatsby came around. It's a German party that did very well actually in America. Another example of course Americans love electro swing. They just don't know it because these parties were completely sold out and they were full of live music and electro swing and swing dancers and that kind of thing. So a lot of the people actually that were touring with that were from Montreal. They really kind of filled my ear with like, you got to come to Montreal. It's such a great scene. It's such a great nightlife city. And I was like, yeah, I'm sold. I definitely want to go.
That's not an invite you're going to turn down, is it?
No way. We have a good friend, Elizar, who's in British Columbia, who's, I've been friends with for a few years now. I don't know that he's doing events out there, but it would be another like outpost station, I think, for a trip to Canada that would make that worth.
Nice. Yeah. So, quick change of pace before we start wrapping up. We're going to do a little mini quick fire round.
Okay.
So no thinking.
Okay, that's easy.
Top 3 things that you never go to a gig without.
Okay, probably my backpack. I have a See, I'm not one of those people who can, remember things. So I have to put everything in one place. So if I have my backpack, it has everything I need. All my cables, all my MIDI controllers, So it would be my top 3 things are my backpack.
That's it. The top 3 things, backpack.
Yep.
Drink of choice, beer, wine, or spirits?
Oh, I like them all.
Oh, at the same time in the same glass.
Yes. Although I have found you really can't mix red. If you're going to drink red wine, you got to just drink red wine. You really can't mix that with too many things.
Yeah, that's very true. I don't drink so much these days, but mixing red wine with other things is a recipe for a bad head, definitely.
Yep, you bet.
And what's the first thing you're going to do as soon as lockdown is fully eased?
I'm picturing, okay, so there's a French restaurant I really like.
Nice.
I'm probably going to go to a French restaurant.
Like food of choice?
This particular French restaurant it's off the menu, so you have to go on a Thursday night to get it. But
French food off menu? This is like Barton Baker tactics, this.
I'm telling you, those guys rubbed off on me. Yeah, no, they have a killer coq au vin that is to die for. So that's what I'm going to get.
Excellent. So before we move on and wrap up, are there any DJs or producers currently, which our audience might not be aware of, that you think we should definitely check out?
Say my brother from another mother, Duke Skellington, of course. I'm sure you're aware of him, but he's a creative force to be reckoned with. Nice. From the same city. I mean, I've become a huge fan of Pisk, as I've already mentioned. I think his sensibilities and mine are very similar, but he has a way of just an incredible way of putting together like very dense zones of music, if you will, that shake hands nicely and everything steps out of everything else's way, and very musical and modern and fun. So he's a guy, every time he drops a single, I'm on top of that. And definitely stay tuned for the next tracks and all leading up to the full-length album release in October. Another grievous part of being a producer is a lot of times you fall in love with tracks that you're working on that maybe aren't single material. You know, they're maybe deeper tracks. And, I love creating the dance floor bombs, but I also really enjoy doing some more artistic or, less commercially available stuff. And so that's what the album is for. All those tracks that never got released as singles wind up getting put out on the album, and there's some gems. So in October, full-length album comes out. In the meantime, we got a couple singles coming out every 6 weeks.
I'm looking forward to hearing the album, dude. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
So we're going to link in the comments below when we post this on social media so people can see Facebook links, etc. But where is the best place for them to listen to your music?
So in the US, everyone has Spotify, so that definitely works. We don't really do Deezer over here or Juno, but I know you guys do, so it's definitely available there.
Nice.
iTunes, anywhere that sells music or streams music, certainly Amazon, certainly Apple.
You've no preference, just listen to my music.
Exactly. I think I do track Spotify because they encourage it. As an artist, you can log in and see how many people Shazammed your song and how many people played your song. And so if you had to pick one, Spotify would be great because that way I know you're listening.
I'm not going to name names because we've not released the interview yet, but you're not the first producer that we've spoken to that has said Spotify is fantastic for artists who want to track what's going on with their music. And, so certain people have said that Spotify's got a bit of a bad name for not paying enough and this and that. But, there's actually quite a lot of people that have said, no, we value your listens on Spotify. So for those of you that are listening that have been avoiding it, it's worthwhile to take note, get on Spotify, and that way your artists know that you're listening as well, which is it keeps everyone motivated in the studio, doesn't it?
Well, especially if you want that artist to come to your city, because the artist can go on and it'll tell you the top 10 cities that are listening to your music as well. So you can see like, oh, so we're planning to go to Germany, and it seems like there's a lot of people listening in, Leipzig. So let's go there. It can help guide your decision making when you're going on tour.
And if we link that with the conversation about cheesy 80s synth, you find out whether you're big in Japan or not.
Exactly. And I am waiting to be big in Japan. Like, come on, Japan, get on board. I want to go to Japan.
Love it. Well, listen, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. I think we're out of time now, so nothing left to say, but thank you for joining us. Thank you for the fantastic music you've been putting out over the last few months, and we can't wait to hear what's next.
Well, thanks for putting up with me. It's been a pleasure.
All the best, brother. Catch you soon.
All right, man.
What's that you say? You gotta turn on the radio. Okay. You got to listen to Prohibition Radio with Emma Claire. You got to listen to Prohibition Radio with Emma Claire.
Oh wow, what a great interview. Thank you to Atom and also to Nanook. It's been an absolute pleasure having him on the show. I know he's super busy, so it's lovely that he found time in his schedule to talk to us. If you'd like to listen to Atom's guest mix, then you need to search for the other Prohibition radio show, which is the music show. You can listen to that one on Mixcloud and also YouTube. So I've been Emma Claire. I should be back with you in September with another exclusive interview.
Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/ProhibitionMCR.